Hello, my name is Hanulewicz. I work as an educator in the Education and Publications Department at the National Museum of Agriculture and Food Industry in Śreniawa. My presentation will concern draft animals in museum education in our institution. Before I turn to the topic of my presentation, however, I would like to present the history of the museum in Śreniawa in a few sentences. The museum was established in 1964 and in 1975 it was granted national status. It is located on the territory of a 19th century landed estate. There are numerous exhibition pavilions, a palace with a surrounding park, a former farmyard consisting of barns connected with a granary, a livestock building and a distillery. We run an orchard of old varieties of fruit trees, a herbal garden and an arable field on the area of 13 hectares of agricultural land, which constitutes the total number of approximately 23 hectares of the museum area. We have 5 topical branches: the Museum of Milling and Water Equipment of Rural Industry in Jaracz, the Museum of Basketry and Hop Growing in Nowy Tomyśl, the Natural History and Hunting Museum in Uzarzewo, the Heritage Park and Beekeeping Museum in Swarzędz, and the Museum of Meat Industry in Sielinko. The museum maintains 12 species of livestock, some of them several conservative breeds, as well as an open-air exhibition of species and varieties of agricultural plants. This living museum complements the rich educational offer of livestock breeding and care as well as plant breeding and tillage presented at the permanent exhibitions. Farm animal breeding and husbandry, veterinary science, beekeeping, rural transport, the preserved glory of carriages, plant cultivation, horticulture, technological progress in agriculture in the 19th and 20th centuries. 4 employees, including 2 specialists, are employed in the Animal Husbandry and Crops Growing department at the museum. Their tasks include handling animals, as well as field cultivation and demonstrations of the use of animals during events and museum lessons, whether in the field, a show square in a park, a stylized rural farm, and a livestock building. In the latter, there is an educational room with full multimedia equipment for about 40 viewers. Appreciating the important role of the farm animals kept at the museum in educational activities, the museum organized the International Scientific Conference, Live Animals in Museum Activities in 2013, which met with a wide response among museum professionals. The main issues raised were the need to adapt animals to the presence of the museum audience to avoid unnecessary stress on animals and at the same time ensure the safety of visitors. Animal welfare is a major issue and compliance with legal regulations is also discussed in the context of working with traditional methods of using animal tools. An important topic was also the economic issues of animal husbandry in museums and, above all, the use of live animals in education. The huge interest in the conference was the reason for the next ones. Conferences in 2016 and 2019 confirmed the worth of keeping farm animals in museums. The museum in Śreniawa is the seat of the Polish Association of Keepers and Friends of Workhorses, and Professor Ewald Sasimowski, equestrian producers of organic food, was established in 2003. Professor Ewald Sasimowski is a member of the European Association for the Promotion of the Use of Trained Horses, FECTU. The forms of educational activity with the use of farm animals at the National Museum of Agriculture in Śreniawa are direct: museum lessons, educational workshops and shows, and indirect forms: events and exhibitions at trade fairs. Among the lessons, we present traditional use of farm animals in fieldwork. This lesson aims to introduce the traditional ways of working with animals. The highlight of the lesson is a demonstration of farm work with the use of the animal draft. The next one is The White Road, a history of village transport, during which forms of transport are presented, from manual to car-driven, taking into account various vehicles. Cattle and horses are also the subjects of other lessons. At the farm, farm animals, preschoolers feed animals, from the village table, butter and cheese. Each year, 3 educational events take place: Easter customs and ceremonies, Autumn in a village, and Christmas customs and ceremonies. The offer is addressed to organized groups of children from kindergartens or primary and secondary schools who are familiarized with Polish customs and customs with animals in the background. Shows are themed interactive meetings on weekends for families with children or individual visitors. They can also be shows carried out at any time on request of groups, for example, oxen workshop in a treadmill or the field, renting a horse wagon, renting a carriage, renting a pony for a saddle ride. 1 or 2 day mass events for a wide group of individual recipients, organized in the number of approximately 10 per year. They present the cyclical nature and rituals of field work and holidays, such as Poznań Potato, otherwise a potato digging show, or the spectacular Whitsun Festival, reminding about dressing up oxen as signs of the coming spring. Horses are also an inseparable element in disseminating knowledge about safety, such as during the event Sunday at the Museum, organized together with the Provincial Police Headquarters in Poznań. As I mentioned, the main species of farm animals have been collected in the museum. Unfortunately, we have not kept pigs for 1.5 years for sanitary reasons, protection related to ensuring episodic conditions of ASF, Asian swine fever. Nevertheless, the most important role is played by cattle and horses, due to the possibility of communicating their leading role in satisfying human living needs: milk, meat, leather, work, safety, and the related rich transmission of material and intangible heritage, especially the use of the muscles of these animals to work in the fields and transport, whether in times of peace or war, determined their important role in the history of mankind. The choice of animals for draft purposes largely depended on the natural and geographical conditions and their domestication, which means that in the Polish lands, mainly cattle and horses for transport and tillage, as well as for driving various tools, especially agricultural ones, should be included in Poland. From the moment of cattle domestication until the third quarter of the 19th century, oxen were the main driving force of agriculture, which gradually began to be displaced by horses. At the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, oxen played an important role in manor farms. Until the Second World War, the draft force of cattle still played a significant role in eastern Poland, Polesie and Wołyń, in the farms of Wielkopolska and the foothills of the Karpaty. After the war, until the 1950s, cattle sleds were maintained mainly due to the lack of tractive power, for example, horses or tractors. A common type of cattle harness in Poland was a neck yoke for a pair of animals permanently joined by a drawbar. In the museum's collection we have 14 specimens of frame-shaped yokes. The yoke for a single ox was used only in the western part of the Karpaty foothills in poor peasant farms. The museum has 19 copies of the single yoke. On the other hand, the yoke was placed on the forehead of the cattle and tied to the horns. In Poland, this harness was used mainly in the territories annexed by Prussia, to a lesser extent the neck yoke. In the second half of the 19th century, ox collars were used to harness oxen, modeled on horse collars. The museum has 12 copies of cattle collars. In the museum, the harnesses that we put on the oxen are exact replicas. For about 10 years, when presenting a cattle sled, we have put on oxen collar harnesses, which is dictated by the convenience for both, the animals and the staff. Starting in the museum at the beginning of this century, the adventure with the use of oxen as a team was faced with difficulties, because there were no working cattle in Poland anymore, and after the profession of herdsmen, only memories and names of some places remained. Looking for an employee who could teach oxen and work with them, one was brought from Romania. Currently, the museum has 2 5-year-old oxen of the native Polish red cattle breed and 2 14-year-old oxen, one of the native Polish white-backed cattle breed and the other of the Simmentaler breed. In the 20-year history of oxen presentation at the museum, mainly white-backed oxen and Simmentaler have been kept. In Poland, the working use of horses, common until the 1970s, is rarely encountered today. Currently, the museum has 8 horses and 1 donkey. These are 2 mares of the native Polish primitive horses, gelding and a mare of the Polish cold-blooded breed, and 4 ponies. Many of our events involve horse-drawn carriages of the before-mentioned members of the Working Horse Association. The educational activity we conduct with the participation of animals, especially cattle and horses, is very diverse. Thanks to such undertakings, the museum public can learn in an accessible way about the importance of livestock farming and agricultural equipment used in the old days.